The wind moved like a whisper with teeth, curling around the pines and slipping down the hillside in long, aching sighs. It carried sleet and silence and something more, a girl in buckskin and mud, stumbling through the gray hush of an almost winter morning. Her steps dragged, each one a prayer, though no God she'd known had ever answered her. She came down through the tree line alone. No horse, no pack, just the clothes on her back, torn, soaked, too thin for the cold, and a hunting knife strapped at her thigh, stained dark and silent as the weight in her eyes. Her hair was black with rain, clinging in ropes down her face, and one side of her mouth was swollen, cracked like river stone. Still, she did not cry. A raven startled from the brush as she passed. She didn't flinch. She had long since run out of flinching. Far ahead, tucked beneath a low rise and flanked by the bones of a split-rail fence, stood a house made of river rock and timber. No smoke from the chimney. No sign of life. Just stillness and the feeling, deep in the gut, that someone lived there without needing to be known. She paused at the edge of the clearing, swaying. Blood, old and rust-brown, stained the hem of her deerskin dress. Her legs were bare, knees scraped raw. Still she stood. She had not come to beg. She had come to disappear. Inside, Eli Thatcher leaned over the kitchen table, whittling a length of ash into something with no name yet. His coat hung on the back of the chair, untouched since September. The stove burned low. Outside, the hush felt too heavy for morning, too alert. He looked up and saw her. No knock, no sound, just the shape of her small and wrong against the wet of the world. He didn't move at first, just watched. The way a wolf might study a wounded deer, not out of hunger, but out of an old memory that didn't know which of them he'd been last time. He stepped outside slowly, leaving the door half open behind him. She didn't move. Only her eyes shifted, quick and sharp, measuring him, the way feral things did. "You need a place to fall down?" he asked, voice low and flat, more rhythm than speech. She blinked once, then again. Her lips parted, then closed. She swayed. That's when he saw the fever in her, high and climbing. Her skin glistened with cold sweat, and her jaw clenched like she was holding herself together with nothing but spite. When her knees gave, he caught her before she hit the ground. She didn't fight him, but she didn't soften either. Her body was light but taut, like a bow half drawn. He carried her inside, laid her on the narrow cot in the corner. She didn't speak, not even when he pulled the wet buckskin from her arms and covered her in wool. Her knife, she gripped until her hand went white. He didn't try to take it. The storm passed. The light in the cabin shifted from slate to silver. She slept. He watched her a long time, noticing things without needing to explain them, to her or to himself. The scars along her ribs, not fresh, not clean. The way she flinched in her dreams, but never cried out. Her mouth moved soundlessly sometimes, names or pleas or curses he'd never know. By evening, she woke enough to drink water from his hand. She didn't thank him. He didn't ask her to. When she could sit up, he offered bread. She took it with both hands, tore it like it was meat, and ate in silence. He asked, eventually got a name. She looked at him, long and unreadable. Then, Willa. No last name. No explanation. He didn't push. "I'm Eli," he said. "This is my place." She looked around, not at the room, but at the doorways, the corners, the shadows. Her voice was quiet, but sure. "You don't ask questions," she said. He nodded. "Don't like answers much anyway." That night, she sat by the stove, bundled in one of his old coats. She didn't shiver, just stared into the fire like it owed her something. Eli sat nearby, working a dent from a tin cup, not talking. There was peace in that, two broken things not trying to fix each other, just keeping company in the silence. The snow began to fall after midnight. Slow, soft flakes whispering against the windows. Willa watched it with a look that didn't reach her eyes. Somewhere beyond the ridge, wolves cried. She didn't look away. He found her asleep on the floor come morning, knife still in her grip, hand twitching now, and then like she was dreaming of running. He draped a blanket over her without touching her skin. For 2 days, she barely spoke. Just ate when given food, drank when he offered water. She stayed close to the fire and far from the door. Once, she asked how far it was to the next town. He told her 25 miles. She said nothing in return. By the third day, she washed her own clothes in the basin and hung them to dry. Her hands were skilled, fast. She braided her wet hair in 3 thick plaits, each one tight and deliberate. "You been here long?" she asked as he poured coffee. 8 years. "You always alone?" He shrugged. "Cabins only got one chair that don't creak." She didn't smile, but something softened. Not trust, not yet, but awareness. That afternoon, she mended one of his shirts without being asked. He didn't thank her. She didn't wait for thanks. When dusk came, she stood on the porch, barefoot, watching the tree line. Not fearful, watchful. He stood beside her. "You expectin' someone?" he asked. "No." "Someone expectin' you?" She was quiet a long time. Then, "Not anymore." The wind picked up. She turned to go in, but paused in the doorway. "You got rules. Just don't bring trouble." "I didn't bring it." He held her gaze. "Steady. Quiet. Then you can stay." Willa nodded once. That was all. Inside, the fire cracked low and warm. Outside, the snow covered her tracks, as if she had never come. But she had. And something, Eli wasn't sure what yet, told him that whatever chased her wasn't finished. Not yet. The days stretched thin and quiet, stitched together by the soft hum of chores and the crackle of the stove. Willa moved like a creature waking from a long winter, still wary, still watchful, but breathing easier now that no one asked her to explain the shape of her wounds. She rose early, always before Eli, her footsteps silent across the cabin floor. Sometimes he heard her behind the smokehouse, whispering to herself or sharpening the edge of her knife on stone. She never left it more than an arm's reach away, even in sleep. It rested against her belly when she curled under the quilt. Her fingers curled around the handle, as if dreaming were something she had to defend herself from. Eli said nothing about it. He had his own reasons for silence, and the house didn't need more of it than it already carried. He simply noticed how she folded her blanket each morning, how she washed her own dishes, how she moved around his belongings like they were sacred and not to be touched. She had boundaries carved into her like riverbeds. He didn't try to dam them. On the 4th day, snow melted off the roof in slow, reluctant drips. Willa stood barefoot by the hearth, her cheeks flushed from the heat, drying her buckskin dress. She wore one of his shirts, cinched at the waist with a scrap of twine. She looked like something from an old dream, half ghost, half girl, standing in the golden flicker of firelight, steam curling around her wrists. He was fixing the hinge on the door when she spoke. "You were a doctor." It wasn't a question. Eli didn't look up. "I was." She studied his hands, the way they moved with quiet purpose. "Why'd you stop?" He paused, eyes still on the hinge. "Some people break so bad, no one knows how to fix them." "And that was your last patient?" He let out a breath, like he'd been holding it for years. "That was me." She didn't press. He didn't thank her for that either. By noon, the clouds cleared, and a thread of sunlight slipped through the shutters. Willa stepped outside for the first time since arriving, her knife at her hip, her gaze scanning the tree line with the calm of someone who'd already decided where to run if she had to. Eli watched her from the window. She didn't know she was being watched, or maybe she did. Either way, she didn't look back. Later, when he walked to Widow Della's for eggs, she asked if the girl in his house was kin. He shook his head. "She's got the look of a runner," Della said, wrapping the eggs in cloth. "That kind don't stop unless they got no breath left." Eli just nodded. Della didn't press either. When he came home, Willa had chopped wood. Not much, just enough to say she was capable. Enough to say she saw him and didn't intend to be a burden. The pieces were rough cut, uneven, but dry. She hadn't used his axe. She'd used her knife. Eli blinked at the pile, said nothing. That night, the wind rose again. Not a storm, just the kind of restless breeze that made trees whisper secrets to one another. Willa sat near the stove, sewing the shoulder seam of her dress. Her fingers worked fast, as if they remembered happier lives. "You sew like someone taught you proper," Eli said. "My mother," she murmured. "When I was small. Before." He waited, but that was all she gave. "You got any family now?" She looked up at him, and her eyes went very still. "I've got me." He nodded. "Good answer." She threaded the needle again, hand steady. Outside, a branch cracked in the woods. She stilled, cocked her head. Eli reached for his rifle, without thinking. "Too close," she whispered. He stepped to the door. Nothing moved out there but wind and moonlight. But he saw it now, how she measured the world not in peace or danger, but in seconds. How many it would take to grab her knife. How many to vanish. "You can sleep inside," he said, watching her. "Ain't nobody comin' for you here." That's not how fear works. She didn't explain what she meant, and he didn't ask her to. That night, he left the lamp burning low and the door unlocked, in case she needed to leave, in case she needed to stay. Around midnight, she rose and stood over him, knife in hand, breathing quiet and shallow. He didn't open his eyes, but he knew she was there. He could feel her presence the way you feel a storm before it hits, a pressure against the air. After a long minute, she turned and went back to her cot. In the morning, he found her cooking cornbread, fire already stoked. She didn't say why. He didn't ask. By the 7th day, something between them had settled. Not trust, but a truce. A rhythm. She would boil water, and he would grind coffee. He'd whittle, and she'd hum those half-remembered songs, the ones with no words, but enough ache to fill the room. He gave her a pair of boots left behind by a friend long dead. She looked at them, then at him. "I didn't come here to be saved." I didn't offer. She took the boots. That evening, she cut herself peeling potatoes. Not deep, but it bled. Eli reached for her hand out of habit, but she jerked back. "I'll do it." Her voice was firm. Still, she let him watch as she wrapped the wound. The bandage was clean, tight. She'd done this before. Too many times. "You got surgeon's hands," he said. "No, just ones that remember pain." She met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw the thread of something soft in her, fragile, maybe, but not broken. Just buried. He opened the window before bed. The air smelled like pine and something faintly metallic. The sky stretched wide and cloudless, stars hanging like questions no one had ever bothered to answer. "You sleep light," he said quietly, half to himself. "I have to," she replied. Then, "But I slept through the second night. Didn't I?" Eli looked at her. She looked at the fire. "I guess you did." It wasn't a confession. It was a gift. And that's when he knew. Whoever had hurt her, they hadn't killed the part of her that still hoped for mornings. She just didn't trust them to come without cost. The next day would prove her right. But that night, as the fire burned low and the world outside paused in its chase, Willa slept with her knife beside her, but not in her hand. That was something. The sound came at dawn, not the high whine of wind nor the crack of a limb, but something deeper, heavier. A distant thrum, like a heartbeat heard through soil. Eli stood in the doorway, mug in hand, steam rising in curls, the coffee forgotten. The sound swelled, not fast like a stampede, but deliberate, controlled, measured. Willa stepped outside barefoot, her braid loose and shoulders rigid. She didn't ask what it was. She already knew. Eli squinted toward the ridge that ran east beyond the tree line. The sun was just pulling itself from the horizon, honey gold and quiet. And then they came. Riders. Dozens of them. A black wave crested in the early light, 70, maybe more, moving in eerie silence, save for the steady beat of hooves on frost-hardened earth. They rode in tight formation, faces painted, braids trailing, weapons slung but untouched. The lead horse was white. The man atop it sat like he was carved from stone, tall, broad across the chest, his face painted with ash and ochre, eyes sharp beneath a ridge of bones shaped by command. A band of eagle feathers fell down his back like a second spine. The other riders flanked him in a crescent, stopping just beyond Eli's fence. Willa exhaled, slow, deep, final. Her shoulders fell, not in defeat, but recognition. She stepped forward. "Willa, I know who they are." Her voice was calm, but her fingers twitched once, reaching toward the knife she hadn't worn that morning. Eli put a hand out, not stopping her, just steadying the air between them. She walked toward the riders barefoot, unarmed, the hem of her dress brushing frost, her breath visible in the morning cold. They did not move. They did not speak, until she stood halfway between the porch and the fence line, and the man on the white horse spoke. His voice was deep and low, carrying not through volume but gravity. "She lives," he said. Willa closed her eyes. "You shouldn't have come." "We came because you ran." "I had to." He dismounted, his boots crunching softly as they hit the ground. Up close, his presence was immense, not cruel, but commanding. His features mirrored Willa's, aged by time and sorrow. His hand hovered at his belt, where a knife just like hers hung. "You think we rode to punish," he said, "but we rode to understand." Eli stood quietly on the porch, rifle still resting against the frame, untouched. He could feel it in the air now, not threat, but something heavier. History, honor, grief, maybe wrapped in protocol. "I left the village before the wedding," Willa said. "I knew what you'd say. What they demand." "No one demands your body," the man said. "Only your truth." Willa opened her eyes, and they shimmered. "You promised me to a man who doesn't believe I'm human. He treated me like cattle. You called it alliance. I called it prison." Behind the man, several riders looked down, shame flickering in the set of their shoulders. "I called it protection," the man murmured. "We had been raided. We were desperate. I did not know his nature until you fled." "And now you do," she said. He nodded once, then turned to Eli. "You sheltered her?" "I did." "She didn't tell you where she was from?" "She didn't need to." The man considered him, gaze sharp but not hostile. "You saw her. That is enough." Willa blinked, startled. Her father stepped closer, lowered his voice. "I thought I'd raised a warrior," he said. "Turns out I raised a fire. And fire doesn't ask permission." She swallowed, her hands clenched, then released. Eli descended the steps, stopping beside her. "She's safe here," he said. "I see that now." The tension broke, not with cheers or smiles, but with breath, the kind that had been held too long. Willa looked at her father, truly looked, and something unspoken passed between them. Regret braided with love, stitched through with understanding. Behind them, the line of riders shifted. Horses pawed at the ground. One man rode forward with a bundle wrapped in leather. "Your mother made this before she passed," her father said. "She believed you'd return, even if not to the village." Willa stepped forward and took the bundle. It was light, cloth, beads, feathers, her mother's stitching unmistakable. She held it to her chest, breath catching. "I dreamed she was gone," she whispered. "She is," he said. "But not from you." They stood in silence as the sky warmed. Eli said nothing. He just waited. Her father mounted again. "Do you wish us gone?" he asked. "No," Willa said. "I just wish you hadn't needed to come with weapons." "They are not weapons," he said gently. "They are witnesses." He turned his horse in a slow arc, the others following, each rider nodding once as they passed Willa and Eli. No one jeered. No one threatened. This was not a rescue. This was a reckoning. As the last rider disappeared into the trees, Willa sat on the porch steps, bundle still in her lap. She did not cry. She was past tears. Eli sat beside her, hands clasped between his knees. "They followed me," she said, voice low. "I thought they were hunting." "You ran to be free," he replied. "Turns out they ran to let you choose." She nodded slowly. The sun was higher now, melting the frost, turning the trees gold at the edges. "I didn't know how to come home," she said. "Then don't," Eli murmured. "Make a new one." He looked at her, really looked. The morning light softening the bruises, still fading across her cheek. "You're not what I expected," he said. "I'm not what anyone expected." A faint smile ghosted across her lips. "That might be your gift." The bundle rested in her lap, and she slowly opened it. Inside, a woven cloth, wedding colors from her tribe, unfinished but radiant, fell open like memory. She ran her fingers over the beadwork. "She believed in me." Eli didn't answer. He didn't need to. The moment held, fragile, suspended, beautiful in the way only hard-earned peace could be. Then Willa looked to the horizon, eyes narrowing. You think they're gone for good? Eli followed her gaze. I think your past came for you and didn't win. She nodded, then stood. Inside, the fire had gone out, but the house was warm. And outside, though the riders had passed, the ground still held the shape of their hooves, like a reminder that some truths ride far, but they ride to be known. Willa didn't reach for her knife when she walked inside. She didn't need to. The days after the riders left were quiet in the way air grows still before a thunderstorm. No more hoofbeats on the wind. No more shadows at the tree line. Just the strange calm that comes when a moment should have changed everything, but didn't, or hadn't yet. Willa moved like someone waiting for the ground to split beneath her. She tended the fire, stacked wood, mended the fence alongside Eli, but her eyes were always scanning, watching not for warriors now, but for the ripples their presence had left behind. Ripples that had traveled faster than horses. News reached town in whispers. 70 warriors had gathered at a white man's cabin, and no one fired a shot. No one died. That didn't sit easy with folks used to stories ending in blood. Deputy Josiah rode up on the fourth morning, dust caking his boots and suspicion riding shotgun in his gaze. Eli met him at the edge of the fence, arms folded, not hostile, but unmoved. Willa stayed inside, back straight, hand resting on the windowsill, watching. You know the kind of fear you stirred up? Josiah asked. 70 Lakota? That's not a visit. That's an invasion by another name. They came for their daughter, Eli said. They left peaceably. You don't speak for what they leave behind. Eli's jaw tensed. She wasn't hiding from them. She was hiding from what they gave her to. Josiah's mouth twitched like he wanted to argue but couldn't find footing. We got folks afraid to let their children out of the house. What do I tell them? Tell them it wasn't their children riding for vengeance. And it wasn't their house where kindness was shown. Josiah studied him, eyes narrowing, then looked past his shoulder toward the house. She's still here. She's not a criminal. I didn't ask that. You didn't need to. For a beat, nothing moved. Then Josiah turned his reins. There's a preacher calling meetings. Wants a statement from you both. We'll give none, Eli said. You sure that's wise? Eli just looked at him. Josiah rode off in silence. Later, Willa stepped onto the porch, arms folded tight over her chest. How bad will it get? They won't ride out here with guns. But they might ride with words. Those can cut worse. She didn't flinch. Let them come. That evening, Della came instead. She brought bread and a look that said she'd already heard 3 versions of the truth and trusted none. She sat at the table like she belonged there and studied Willa as if she were reading scripture. Slow, careful, reverent. You're not what they say, she said finally. I'm not what anyone says, Willa replied. Della nodded. Good. She left the bread, kissed Eli's cheek, and warned them both to stay alert. Fear makes people dumb, and dumb people with guns make ghosts. Willa slept lightly that night. Knife near, but not on her chest. Eli sat by the window, whittling by lantern light, every creak outside the cabin ringing louder than it should. The next day, they rode into town. Eli didn't say why, and Willa didn't ask. Some things don't need reason, just timing. They arrived at midday, the street half empty, townsfolk peering from windows and behind doors like a wind had come through that they didn't want to name. Willa walked beside Eli, her chin high, eyes forward. Her dress was clean, her boots steady on the earth. At the church, a cluster of men had gathered, preacher, blacksmith, the storekeeper, and a few who'd never said more than a word to Willa in their lives, but now claimed to know her danger. Eli stepped forward. We came so you could look at her while you talk. The preacher blinked. This is a house of peace, not spectacle. Then speak peace. Or be quiet. The preacher cleared his throat. You housed a stranger. That's your right. But you let warriors ride onto your land, armed, unannounced. You brought tension to a town that's worked hard for quiet. Willa's voice rang out. I didn't ask to be found. I ran because the quiet you built meant nothing if it cost me myself. A murmur rolled through the men. Some looked uncomfortable. One, Jeremiah Post, who fancied himself a suitor in years past, stepped forward. You think you can just run to a white man's cabin and call it freedom? That ain't how this works. Eli's jaw set, but it was Willa who stepped past him. No, she said, voice calm. I didn't run to be rescued. I ran to be unchained. And I stayed because here I was not owned. The preacher opened his mouth, then closed it. Willa continued. My father rode with warriors because he thought I was dead. He rode with honor, not to burn your town, but to bury your fear. He left in peace, though you offered him none. She turned to the crowd. I have a name. I have a voice. And I have never drawn a weapon against any of you. If that frightens you, it's not because of what I've done. It's because of what you haven't dared to see. Eli stood beside her then, just his presence, solid, unmoving. The crowd didn't cheer, but they didn't jeer either. The preacher folded his arms. We'll be watching. You always were, Willa said. But now I'm watching back. They left in silence. On the ride home, the road was quiet save for the crows overhead and the rustle of cottonwood leaves. Eli glanced at her, his voice low. Never heard you talk like that before. I've never been listened to before. That night, they sat on the porch. The stars above were crisp and cold, the kind of stars that felt too honest to lie under. Eli sipped his coffee. Willa watched the woods. You think they'll come back? She asked. Your father? No. The town. They never left. They're just learning how to look at you. She turned to him, eyes darker than nightfall. What do you see, Eli? He didn't speak right away. Then, I see a girl who walked into fire and didn't scream. I see someone the world tried to name wrong and couldn't. She leaned her shoulder into his. You didn't save me, she said. I know, and I don't owe you for the roof. I never asked. She was quiet a moment longer. Then, you think peace lasts? It's not supposed to, he said. You just hold it as long as you can. The wind picked up, gentle this time, carrying the scent of pine and thawing earth. Somewhere a bird called, lonely, low, hopeful. They didn't go inside for a long while, not because it was cold or warm or because of any reason at all. They just stayed, holding the moment, not because peace had come, but because, for now, it had not left. The morning began like any other, frost on the window panes, bread rising slow in the cast-iron pot, and Willa seated cross-legged near the hearth, threading bone beads onto the wedding cloth her mother had left behind. Her fingers moved with purpose, weaving silence into meaning, each stitch a memory, each loop a defiance. Eli watched her from the kitchen, hands wrapped around his coffee mug. He hadn't asked what she was making, didn't need to. The colors told their own story, deep red for courage, ochre for grief endured, white for truth. The cloth was not meant for tradition. It was meant for rebirth. He stepped outside to split wood, breath fogging in the cold. Snow had fallen the night, soft and clean, hiding the scars of the ground beneath. He worked in rhythm, letting the blade fall where it needed to, thinking of nothing but the swing. Then the stillness shifted. The birds stopped singing. The air thickened, brittle as glass. He turned toward the ridge. A single figure rode out from the tree line. The horse was bay, dust rising at its hooves, and atop it sat a man Eli recognized too late. Jeremiah Post, face ruddy with whiskey and righteousness, rifle slung careless across his saddle. His hat was tilted back, and in his eyes burned the kind of certainty that had started wars. Willa stepped out just as Eli dropped the axe. Jeremiah pulled the reins hard and dismounted, boots crunching on snow. You got something don't belong to you, he called. Eli moved first, body slipping between Willa and the man without thinking. She belongs to herself, he said. Jeremiah spat into the snow. She was promised. Her kind don't get to break promises. Willa's voice cut through the cold like a blade. I made no vow to you. Jeremiah's hand twitched toward his rifle. You think this little haven makes you untouchable. Eli stepped forward, calm as a winter lake. Put it down, Jeremiah. The man's jaw clenched. Or what? You'll shoot me? Kill one of your own for her. I'd protect what's mine, Eli said. Willa's breath caught. Not a possession. A choice. Jeremiah's rage boiled over. He raised the rifle, not quite aiming, just threatening, the way men do when they want to be feared but not stopped. Willa didn't wait. She stepped around Eli, her feet crunching softly through the snow. "You don't scare me," she said. Jeremiah's hands trembled. "You should have stayed with your own," he hissed. "I did," she said. "And they let me go." In that moment, something in him cracked. He raised the rifle fully, wildness in his eyes. The shot rang before the trigger pulled. Eli's body jolted. The bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him sideways into the snow. Time froze. Jeremiah stumbled back, startled by the gun in Willa's hand. Hers now, Eli's old revolver from under the porch steps, one he hadn't touched in years. Her aim was steady. Her hands didn't shake. "You should leave," she said. Jeremiah stared at the blood-darkening Eli's shirt, the unflinching calm in Willa's eyes, and knew. He dropped the rifle and fled, boots slipping, heartless as ever. She rushed to Eli's side, pressing her hands to the wound. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please don't leave now." His eyes fluttered. "Not going anywhere." She laughed through the tears. "Stubborn. You shot near his ear." "I meant to miss." "You always mean what you do." She helped him inside, worked with practiced hands, cleaned, stitched, wrapped. Not a fatal shot. Still, it left her shaken. Not from fear. From what it awakened. She'd never defended someone else before. Not like that. Not with the part of herself she'd once buried. By afternoon, the wound was clean and the sky had cleared. Willa stepped outside and looked to the east. Then from the ridge, a thin line of smoke began to rise, curved, deliberate, ancient. She watched it unfurl against the blue sky. A message, sent in her father's hand. Peace offered, peace witnessed. We ride again, not to reclaim, but to remember. She breathed it in like medicine. She walked back inside and set the wedding cloth in Eli's lap. "I finished it," she said. He looked down, eyes soft. "That for me?" "It's not a wedding yet," she said. "But it's a promise." He traced a line of beadwork with his thumb. "What kind?" She met his gaze. "To build something we've never seen." His hand found hers. Slow. Always slow. That night, the fire burned high. Eli lay resting, one arm tucked behind his head. Willa sat by the window, watching the last curl of smoke fade from the ridge. She thought of her mother, sewing by lamplight. Of her father, proud but learning. Of warriors who rode 70 strong without spilling blood. Of a man who had seen her without demanding a story. Of a cloth made not for tradition, but for truth. Outside, the snow fell again, soft as breath. Inside, the cabin no longer felt borrowed. It felt claimed. Not through violence, through care. The kind that survives bullets. And silence. And history. In the stillness, Willa whispered a vow, one no one had forced her to make. "I'm not running anymore." Eli stirred. "Then I'll stop waiting." She leaned her head against the frame, the wedding cloth folded in her lap. A new life didn't come all at once. It came like snow, flake by flake, soft, sure, unmistakable.